And I'm one of the founding members of the Public Pool. Jim is also, and Kathy is responsible for the shows around us today. So I'm going to talk a little about Public Pool and how we started, and then talk a little about the history of our shows here. So I'm a writer. I'm a zine writer, and I don't know if all you know what a zine is, but it's a small independent publication that I do myself. And so I've been working on Stupor, which is my zine, which is over there next to the door, for almost 20 years now. I've been doing them. And I originally started doing them, first what Stupor is, it's a collection. Each issue is a collection of stories I get from people I meet at bars. And write them down the issue, and then I work with a different artist on each issue to do the layout for it. So I started doing working with artists with Stupor back around 2006, and around that time I'd give them the text and they'd lay it out. I worked with I got the folks who used to run this space were Mitch and Gina of Design 99. And they liked what I was doing, and so they gave me a show here. Shortly after that, it was a Stupor show. Shortly after that, I worked with an artist who did the layout for me. Her name's Nina Bianchi, and we put a show together of, it was all about copy machine art. And so I collaborated with her on a different level that I had in Stupor. You know, she did a layout for me, but then also we did this show. We put a show together here. And so that was pretty exciting for me. I really like being involved with arts that way, and organizing the show and putting it up and then seeing what would happen with it. And then Design 99 shut down. They shut their doors, and suddenly there was this big gap here in town. There was no hub anymore for artists to gather or to see shows, interesting shows. And so we talked about it. I talked about it with some friends and talked to the owner of the space, and we were trying to figure out what we could do to make it continue. So Jim over there came over with his wife to my house, and we ate some pizza and talked about how we might be able to fund it. And we decided that if we got 5 people together, that we could afford rent. And rent is pretty low here, so we would all pitch in our money and pay for rent for the space, which is what we've done. And so Jim and Mary's his wife, they come from a marketing background, and they have a couple of friends that also were connected to the arts. So Toby Barlow, who became part of this as well, Jim recruited, and he's a writer and also works in marketing. And then Jessie Doan, who works with, she's part of MoCAD. She does some work in MoCAD. And then a friend of mine, Tim Haley, is also part of it too. And so we were the 5 sort of founding members of the Public Pool. Tim Haley's an artist. He lives in Indiana, but he still comes out every so often. Hopefully he's coming out today. He's not here today. But, and then, Walter Waszak joined up, who's a writer and works for Model D, and another artist in town, George Ramios, became part of our group. So once we got things going, we decided we formed an LLC because we were going to be running the space, and so we did that. So we were actually a company. We don't make any money at all. Sort of lose money every year. Aggressively lose money. I think we made $100 through the space, and then we all paid in total about $5,000.
So we only $4,900.
So yeah. So this year is our first show. This is Tim Haley's work, and he created these murals on the walls. This is a photo of that wall. It's a really big piece, and his idea was this is called "Take a Chance in Rock and Roll," and it was this idea about how the spaceships were in the 70s albums. You know, there were all these spaceships on the albums, and there was this like real positive feeling in the 70s. So Tim latched onto that and created these large murals and album covers all over the room. How do you make that thing go?
No,
okay. So this is an event. We started putting events together to connect to the shows. So we had these rock chicks, what did you call it, Jim?
Rocker Chicks and Readings.
Rock chicks and readings. So yeah, we had these folks came out and they did some songs like from ELO and Journey or something, and then we had spoken word.
Metallica cover that they're doing.
Yeah, spoken word from like Boston, Journey and stuff like that. So, this was our first event we did here, really. You go ahead and you can ask something. Okay, this is a photo here from our second show. The second show was a really complicated show called Nocturnal Translations. And we got 8 writers to write their dreams down, and then we gave them to eight artists. So it's sort of an assignment for both writers and the artists. And we asked the artists to somehow render their dreams, render the writer's dreams. And so this is a rendering here of a dream by Phil Cooley. And this is Nicola Cooper's work here. And so yeah, it was a really complicated show. We ended up making we made this brochure here, and it has like all the dreams of all the writers in it too. And so it had like a lot of different elements in it. It was really ambitious and sort of crazy for a second show, but we did that. This is another event we had. It's connected to our third show, which was a group show. We began, when we were putting the group shows together, like the dream show we did there, we collaborated as a group, and we come up with the, Jim maybe likes this artist, so we're going to use that artist. Jesse Dillon likes this artist. So we built the shows that way. And this is a closing party here. There was an opera, and then this is the Zerina's plane performing here. And the show Erasure was about these things disappearing. They're wearing sort of inverted burqas and dancing around. And so it's this idea of sort of disappearance of maybe one's person. But it was a really cool show. Go ahead. This is the show that came up right after that. It was Jessica Frelinghuysen, and she's been a big part of our gallery since then. The show is titled In Your Neighborhood, and she basically wanted to create a representation of Hamtramck, and so she, on the back wall, created this mural from this large tree-like structure. She had cans hanging where you could put them up to your ears and listen to like sounds of the neighborhood, and then she created this sound collection suit that she would use to go around town and collect the sounds and stuff. Since then, you can go next one now. Jessica also, with the closing party, we had a potluck, which was sort of one of the beginning potlucks we had here, the first potlucks, and but it was a great way to get people in the neighborhood out, and it was a real community event then. And Jessica now, going back to Stupor, Jessica started working on a Stupor with me, so this is another way that I was able and am able to collaborate with artists in a different way in the space, and to work with my own projects and collaborate. And Jessica then has been involved with other things and 3 other shows here. So, go ahead, the next one. This was sort of our most bombastic, fantastic thing we ever did here. It was during a show we had during the auto show. So we had a show indoors here. It was all about cars and how cars mess things up or make things cool or whatever. And then outdoors here in Bozick parking lot, we had a auto smash-up derby, and it was all by remote control. And these things drove around and shot fireworks out and knocked each other over. It was pretty incredible, and Jim really put that together. It was great.
Not a great idea.
Yeah, but nobody got
It
hurt.
worked out really well.
It did,
We
yeah.
don't have a huge liability waiver here. So,
But we weren't on our property. Anyway.
yeah, so Bozex did not get sued.
Nobody got yeah. And the city helped us by like setting up all the barricades. So it was a lot of help actually. There were a lot of people involved with that project. It's just another example of a group show that we put together here. It's all about clothing, and it's really kind of like a beautiful gallery setting there. That piece in the middle is actually made of sausage casings, that pretty dress.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, that was great kind of pretty show and gallery. Go ahead. This is not a pretty show in the gallery. This is when Scott Hocking came in and he filled the gallery with trees and trash. And but it's a good example of what we like to do here is we like to work with artists and allow them to do whatever they want in the space. So, and really we're asking, and what we asked Scott to do is to create an environment in the space. And so so he took it and he made it however he wanted. We didn't know exactly what he was going to do. We knew it was going to involve trees and trash, and it did. And it was sort of beautiful and ugly and awful at the same time, but and everybody seemed to be allergic to it. But it was a great piece. It really transformed the space. This is another example of an artist who transformed the space and made an environment in here. This is a piece by Michael McGillis. And it was all about invasive species. Those are phragmites, those tall weeds that seem to take over where cattails are, and coyotes, invasive species. And then there's like this long trailer in there or something that's shipping container. So he did the same thing as well. Next one. George Rami, who became a member of the public pool too. Now George wasn't really creating an environment in here, but we wanted him to do something real tangible and connect to the neighborhood. So we asked George if he would make this his studio while he was here. While the show was here, he actually worked here the whole time. So he had like a 3-month tenure where he worked in the space every day. That piece behind him, he built in the space. He does cut and paste work. And this is a slide from the day that we had a cut and paste workshop in the gallery, which happened during the Neighborhood Arts Festival in Hamtramck, which is something I put together with Steve Panton, who runs the Edwin Gallery. And we do it every year in the fall. We ask artists to open up their studios, and most of them are in their houses, and then it's sort of, you can go from house to house and see what artists are doing in the neighborhood. We have music on porches, and then workshops around in the different spaces, and in the evening we have a writer's component to it as well. Okay. This is another example of the environment that's created in the space. This is Andy Krieger's work. He created a department store around the holidays. And that was his idea. It was around the holidays, and he wanted to replicate like a Sears store and what it looked like around the holidays as well. Okay, next one. So he made this a photo booth, and people got in the photo booth and got their pictures taken, and kissed and stuff. This is another show we did, a group show. We asked 4 people to create a work that wasn't finished. And it was called You Build It. So they created like a framework for a piece, and then the viewer was allowed to, or instructed to finish it in some way. So this is Andy Thompson's work. It's on this wall right here. And yeah, so everybody got an opportunity to scribble on the walls, and some people did all kinds of crazy stuff in here. It was a lot of fun. Next one. Okay, this is the Writer's Buffet. In the background, it's a show by the Hygienic Dress League. But so the Writers Buffet is something, Good Time Writers Buffet is our literary project that we do here. It's 6 to 8 readers read at each one for 10 minutes each, and then we have a neighborhood potluck, which connects back to Jessica's piece, the neighborhood piece. And then we have DJ playing. And it's sort of my attempt to build a writers community in the area and to have this like kind of lazy, social, good time where we get to hear writers buddy up with each other and talk and have a good time. And so it's been a pretty successful event for us here. And we recently got funding for it from the Knight Foundation, and it's so they've given us money so we can fly people in for the Writers Buffet. And it's also going to sort of fund our space as well. And so we're trying to raise money now to match it because it's a matching grant. So if any money that you guys put over there in our donation jar, it's double today. So feel free to throw in some
It's
money.
a cash register, that plastic
Yeah.
bowl.
It's over there. Yeah. Okay. Next one. Okay. So this is me reading at a show that Jessica Frailing hasn't built here. So Jessica was she was the one who did the neighborhood piece. So she put together this stupor, and we released it during a group show that she built here. And this is sort of the closing event for her show. But so that was the last point I wanted to make was that we started sort of backing off and we didn't build shows anymore as like a group, or we haven't done it for a long time. We've been giving artists that opportunity to come in and then build a show, and we kind of guide them and work with them. But it's changed the space a little bit in that it brings in a lot more ideas, and a lot more artists that we know are able to show here now, and then it gives other artists the possibility of presenting us with a proposal and putting shows together. So it's opened up the space in a new way. So we started with Jessica and her show, and now Kathy has put this show together here, and so that's pretty much where we're at now. So Kathy is going to talk a little about the show we got now.
Oh, excellent. Really fun to see all these images because I think I've been to almost all those shows. So my name is Kathy Lisa, and I'm an artist and musician here, and I just came to this gallery a lot. I came to this gallery when it was Design 99, as Steve mentioned before, Mitch and Gina, and I really always liked the energy here. The shows were always interesting. They always took a lot of risks, like with the car show, but they executed it well. And I really appreciate that. I'm someone who has, for a long time, organized shows, but I'm a very untraditional person. That's how I really like to experience art and make art and be around art. So I really was drawn to this place. So I got to know Steve just by coming to many openings here and being friends with artists that were showing here. And so one night after an opening, we were talking, and Steve had mentioned they didn't have a show for this month. And of course, I can't help myself. I started having ideas, and then Steve started bouncing ideas back to me about different people, and he came up with a title. And so it was really fun for me to kind of build a show in a way that was just anything else that I would do creatively. I didn't have this master plan, and then I filled in all the chunks. I just had an idea that led to another idea, that led to another idea, and then we made this. So I really love all the pieces in the show, obviously, because I picked them. And I really enjoyed that creative process of working with a writer and working with a group of people. I mean, they have a marketing department, which is really cool. As someone that has I've organized shows before where I had to do everything, and to have different people to work with was actually really nice, and it opened up a lot of space for me. So, I think that's a good description. Questions?
How did you settle on the theme of art is anti-art is art?
So originally, when we were talking about different artists, Steve was saying, oh, it's like anti-art. And originally the phrase that we were using is art as anti-art as art. And it was just sort of a playful Dada thing. You know, I mean, really, in this day and age, you can't, nothing is radical, right? You can't make any radical art. It's already been made. So I just like the playfulness of it, and I personally have always really responded to art that is, where does it become art? Everyone has this line that they draw. This is craft, or this is just play, or this is this, but this is art. And so I've always been interested in that space in between, so I responded to that. And through the process, we went back and forth, like writing so many emails. I got an iPhone, so I'd be sitting there writing on my iPhone all the time, and I would come up with stuff. And so eventually I felt that, well, this is art. Art as anti-art is art. And to me, a lot of things are art, and I don't like making those distinctions. So I just decided to go ahead with the art as anti-art is art, and people can take it as they want. And I have written about, art to me is a very confusing, ungraspable, nebulous thing, and that's why I'm so drawn to it. And I think that's what, to me, all that discussion and all those words mean. It's just opening up the possibilities instead of making definitions, or instead of closing it off into this or this or this or this. I like that space.
Can you talk about what ties some of these pieces together?
Yeah, so originally, so there is definitely a theme of modest or home materials. The baseball card zoetrope is Claire's childhood baseball card collection. I really like that it's personal, and it's something that you wouldn't normally think of as using as artwork. The paintings are made out of duct tape. They are very intricate, duct tape, and also using drywall tape. I love that. They're beautiful paintings, but duct tape is not something that people really think about using. The pieces that are kind of hanging out with you there, those are Dylan. He made these carpet sculptures, as he calls them, but clearly there's cats running all over them. These sculptures are so funny to me because they look like animals. They're obviously cat scratch posts, right? That is their inspiration, but they themselves look like animals. The little feather on top that says Dylan gets me every time. It's so wonderful. This bass guitar is a model ship and also a bass, and this functions. This bass is performed in a band. This gets played every weekend. Obviously not right now, but I love that it's so functional and so bizarre and so gorgeous. And more duct tape, and then this piece is a video piece made on an iPhone. So I guess there's something that I really like about just the very accessible materials. They're accessible in your everyday use, but I don't think they're accessible naturally as art pieces. And so that to me is like that's what's interesting. Good? Yes?
Do you have any thoughts about making critical judgment? Obviously you make critical judgment when you choose pieces.
Yes.
Can you speak at all to the whole context of, okay, a lot of people are doing a lot of stuff around town, and unless I'm wrong, there really isn't any critical judgment going on. It's like, okay, here's the stuff, I think it's good.
Yes.
But nobody's really seriously critiquing anything that's going on, particularly as, art culture in town seems to be growing.
Right.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I've actually seen a couple, every time I have that thought, I find a couple websites where people are actually writing reviews, which is nice. But I do think I would personally like more discussion about art. A lot of times at openings, it's a social event, and you go there just to see people and say hello. And so for this opening, that was something that I wanted to address. So in my own, like in its own world, I thought about that. And I wanted to have a speaker with a live Q&A so that we'd actually talk about the artwork instead of just talking about like what we're going to do later on at night or the night before or whatever. And so we had someone who had their own character. He made a character to kind of break the ice of a very serious art person, and then ended up asking all of the artists individually questions about the show. I'm not sure that addresses your question about like having serious critique, because we certainly didn't walk around and say like, what works about this and what doesn't, and why doesn't, and what is this reference, and on and on. It's difficult to have that. And a lot of artists don't actually like doing that. They don't enjoy that.
I think the critique level is happening at this level, where the curatorial people like Kathy are making those distinctions. But to your point, making choices. But the tradition, the broader culture has lost. I mean, we've lost our art writers at the Detroit News and Detroit Free. Joy Colby is the last true art critic that I think this market has had, on that top level. And I think the infill is happening in the blog space and other kind of smaller venues. And at the level where people like Kathy are making choices and we're making choices for, and there's a tension, I think, even at the level of public pool participants between, our desire to be open and welcoming to many audiences and the integrity of the art. So we're always pulling that thread kind of back together. And I think the critique is really much more grassroots now than it is top mind, mainly because media have cut off budgets for true art critic writers.
Yeah.
I could mention that there might be an elephant in the room, a certain kind, because we're outsiders, we're coming here from another part of the country. There is a strong pull to try to bring really good art writing in. One of them is the literary project, the building, to bring people in. But there is a kind of an anti-intellectual aspect about this region that's really strong, that really kind of doesn't like that.
What the fuck are you talking about, dude? That's great. It's so true.
He stays funny.
It's so true.
So that is kind of the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. It's I just agree. I don't really have a comment, but I think that's not just to my mind. That's not just in the art community. I think that's in the broader culture. There's an anti-intellectualism around every kind of deeper thought.
Like as an American U.S. thing.
Exactly. So, to me, our tension has been, this is an intellectual space. We put a lot of thought into what we do, but it doesn't mean we don't have a sense of humor.
Right.
We're not playful about it. We're very thoughtful, and I don't know if we put a lot of time into working with people to get that, to communicate that. Our interest as members, I think, has been, in my job, or what Steve does day to day to make money, we don't have an outlet for our creative. This is where we throw that energy. And I know we don't have time to follow up, I think, on those kind of deeper, broader conversations. We're just putting up shows and trying to figure out how to promote them, and that's where our energy is. Hopefully somebody else will come in and sweep back around and pick that thread up, but
I just wonder if the whole idea of art writing and even art making, and those who, should I say it, who actually teach art, if the very concept has not actually been, with consciousness, been deprofessionalized.
Not in this gallery.
I mean,
Yeah.
in this nation.
mm-hmm.
I think to public pool's credit though too, having that playfulness with critique and like having that idea of like looking at art differently. I think that's more accessible to people, because everyone comes comes to look at things in like a different way, you know, like not everybody has like a art background or not everyone has, you know, A or B background, but you know, when you look at something and you have that playfulness, I feel like that becomes more accessible. Maybe, but that's just my opinion. But I don't know.
I think the tension is on the other side of that is that, you know, so I work on the DIA's reinstallation project, and this was the tension there when you try to make art accessible. If you don't make it accessible, where's the entry point for people, you know, and you just put up art by the isms without any sort of context. You know, the flip side of that argument is that this is elitist or this is, you know, not for me. So, you know, I don't know where the balance is, but I know that's where the tension of the conversation definitely is. So there's an intellectual side, but also I think people sometimes use that to say this is only for me and it's not for you. And I think we've been consciously trying to be open with an intellectual offerings that are open to people. So, you know, it's a tough balance.
It's an uphill battle.
It is.
I'd just add probably that I think our region is more protectionist too, because we've gone through so many different struggles during a period, and that leads not necessarily to like an anti-intellectual, but more protectionist, more really just kind of, you know, looking after our crafting community in a more tight-knit area, like personally just speaking.
Do you think in that sense, like, that a lot of professions are more siloed because of that? Or like, do you think that, like, I don't know, I'm asking questions now. But do you think that's the case, like, real?
I think you bring up a very good question, but what I brought back before was how there's been a lot of areas that I think in the past 25, 30 years have been in stages been deprofessionalized. Among them,
Do you think that's a
teaching.
bad thing?
Among them, a lot of aspects of art making, and one of the biggest ones is writing has been deprofessionalized.
Does that also make it more accessible though, if it's deprofessionalized? I'm just throwing out ideas.
I think it makes it less so, because it
Yeah.
makes it less of you making a living at it.
Yeah. Less motivation to do it.
Less value.
Yeah.
If it has less value, don't even pay attention to it.
Less credibility too.
It's interesting in this context of we're talking in terms of rebel, but a little bit what you're talking about is there's sort of like my experience anyway. My interest in art is to challenge in a way that insists on growth, and that's a little bit like eat your vegetables. And how is like eat your vegetables, do the things that are hard, you know, climb the mountain, you're going to be sore by the time you get to the top. How does that fit in like the context of rebellion? Like, the siloing of different professions, there's sort of this, well, you know, industry has quote unquote failed us here. Academia has quote unquote failed us here. You know, kind of closed door. There's sort of an understanding of closed doors in all directions. And so this, you know, there's sort of this turn to a grassroots kind of recommunication, reconnection.
The cost of getting in has just been higher and higher and
Absolutely.
higher.
Absolutely.
I keep thinking someone's got their hand up right
Whining. No, I really identified the idea of deprofessionalization of writing and of the sort of playful and like ownership-based intellect in the local art world, which is really, I mean, I don't think it's about me, but I mean, I taught the introductory studio metals class and insisted that the students actually talk to one another about local cultural events. And they said, well, what about my favorite band playing at Magic Stick? I said, well, why isn't that cultural? Why can't you have ownership there? And we also, for many of them, we wrote their first artist statements and resumes. I mean, they had no idea even how to function in sort of like a commerce-driven professional world. Because I'm just doing art. It's like how are you gonna change the game if you're not developing the skills to play the game?
think a lot of the deprofessionalism in the arts in general has come from removing it from education. So basically, if you're saying at the very base level of education that it's not worth our children's time, then why the heck would it be worth their time as a career path? So I think that's really like a root of where that shift has happened. And those fortunate enough to make it through to education and the secondary level, you know, in the arts, are kind of like squeaking into it, but having a hard time finding the niches within, you know, trying to find a career path that pays the bills, you know. But I think it really comes down to that beginning of education that's shifted a lot. So.
I have a question for public pool. Has Critic Car been here?
Who?
Yeah, I think they have, the Knight funded that, I think.
Critic Card.
It's a writer that runs around in a car.
Oh, Critic Card.
Yeah.
He got it.
A couple of years ago, Knight funded, I think she's from New York or is Conley.
Yeah, Jennifer Connelly.
They go around and basically they'll put a microphone in your face, have an opening, and say, well, what do you think? Do you like it? And at that same time, they also funded in other cities engagements that were more critical. And I've always wondered, like, okay, is it that we're, you know, so no-fly zone, provincial, I don't know what you want to call it, you know, fucked up, who knows? But, you know, there was the opportunity there, but it's almost like the people with the cash decided, well, shit, they're not ready, let's just let people talk. I don't know.
And we have a night blogger in the area, Rosie Sharp, who comes to every show here and writes about them.
Where?
Right here in Detroit.
No, but I mean, where do I find it?
Oh, you can go
it's on
to
the
Knight's blog site
on the
or
Night
whatever,
Arts
or
blog.
Night Detroit
Yeah.
blog.
She's different than the Critic Car person. But
Yeah,
she's,
no, she gives a pretty good review of everything. I mean,
Yeah.
a critical review, goes around the room, looks at every piece, shows the
I
photographs.
don't know if
of the
anyone's ever kind of slammed us though, you know, and I mean that almost as a negative in that.
Because we deserve it.
Well, is it?
I don't know if we deserve it or not, but my point is like, you know, when we used to do shows at the DIA and they were so, Joy Colby would pop us, you know, and I think that helps kind of elevate how people consider and think about things. I think that's positive, you know. I think the writing I've seen, and I don't know, I haven't read everything she's done, so it's probably not fair for me to put through, you know. But what I've read is always more about community and the event, and it talks about the show almost in the way that we've positioned it and pushed it out and how we think about it. But I don't think anyone's ever kind of said it doesn't work because of this, or this, in a critical. I don't think anyone's looked at us in a critical lens, and you know.
I think you get it more maybe from a writer like Vince Carducci.
Exactly. Glenn Manistow, you know, he used to do a lot of stuff for Times, Vince Carducci, and I don't.
I mean, Vince is still doing his Motown Review of Art blog, so
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. What's nice about what Vince does is he'll find a way to thread historical references so you kind of understand where, okay, you know, back in 1968, the situationists were doing this, and this is an extension of that, or whatever.
He has an art history
He's really good at
mindset.
that. Yeah.
I used to work, I've worked for a lot of the different publications in the area, including some that were mentioned here, writing and like shooting, and a lot of times it was, it's not saying you're not allowed to write bad reviews, you know, but like especially right now with everyone pumping out so much positivity, especially a certain funder, you're not supposed to write bad reviews. But it's different with people like Vince, who's working independently, you know, so he can write whatever he wants, and also he's very, very, very smart, so, you know, he can give those historical context and stuff. Yeah. And then also, like, you know, it's nice to have a job working, like writing for anyone, but also the amount that you're getting paid is just not that much too. So like, at the end of the day, it's like how much research can you put into it when you're working 2 other jobs to pay your bills.
It's very interesting the context that we've been talking about, like deprofessionalization and grassroots, and like how like those things lift up the profession more. Maybe is that like accurate? I don't know. Maybe I'm opening up more.
I don't think we're trying to do that. We're just trying to have good shows. And,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have an
That makes
agenda like
sense.
that at all.
But whether you're personally
sorry,
acknowledging it or not in the agenda, there is, that's another elephant in the room. There is an us and them going on. And they don't like to talk about that here, the us and them. Because if you talk too much about it, then the them is not going to help fund the us.
Yeah, again, I don't know if we think about things that, I mean, the beauty of this space is we don't need them because we put our own money in. So it's kind of.
But you're acknowledging that there is a them and there's an us.
Yeah, I
Which
guess
is why
so.
this exists.
Yeah.
I think part of that too, though, is that the yes also. I mean, your agenda may not actually be so consciously that, but then there is somehow kind of a larger and less explicit culture coming from the work that's being produced and then how it's being curated. I mean, folks are now kind of doing these. I mean, it's not even just that they're making collectives, but they're making sort of networked collectives where one artist is working from 4 different spaces and they're all kind of intersecting different resources and shows and their virtual shows and their material shows and their like life skills trainings and things like that, which are very much sort of an implicit agenda to not necessarily rebel outside of this. I'm just kind of trying to think about how this relates to the general theme, but there is sort of like a structuralist, like let's rebel by rebuilding or by improving or in a way by dealing with the us versus them and the growing recognition that us is them and all that other happy post modernist.
I think that's a really great bookend to end on. Thank you so much. Yeah.